Glendale Memorial was built in the 1930s, a sprawling brick structure with newer wings added haphazardly over the decades. Most of the hospital had been modernized, but the fifth floor of the old surgical ward remained largely untouched. Outdated and too expensive to renovate, it had been closed for years, used only for storage and occasionally as overflow during severe flu seasons. My first encounter with the fifth floor came during my second year of residency. I was pulling a double shift hour 22 of 36 when my pager buzzed with a code that didn't make sense. The display read simply, "Assist 5W to 3, room 23 on the west wing of the fifth floor, the closed floor." I called the nurse's station, assuming it was a mistake. "This is Dr. Winters. I just got paged to fifth floor west, but that's closed, right?" There was a long pause before the charge nurse responded, her voice oddly flat. "We didn't page you, doctor." I checked my pager again. The message remained, "Assist 5W to 3. Someone must have." I insisted. "I'm looking at the page right now." Another pause, then, "The fifth floor station has been unmanned for 7 years, Dr. Winters." A chill ran down my spine, but I dismissed it as exhaustion, pagers malfunction, systems glitch. I was about to hang up when the nurse added something that froze me in place. "But you're the third person to ask about a fifth floor page this week." Curiosity overcame caution. After finishing with my current patient, I found myself walking toward the service elevators at the back of the hospital, the only ones that still stopped at the fifth floor. The elevator creaked ominously as it ascended, the indicator lights for floors 3 and for flickering before settling on 5. When the doors opened, I was greeted by darkness, the motion sensor lights long disabled to save electricity. I used my phone's flashlight to illuminate the space before me. Unlike the busy, lived-in feel of the active hospital floors, the fifth floor existed in a state of suspended animation. Dust-covered equipment lined the walls. Old gurneys with cracked vinyl mattresses sat abandoned in corners. The air hung heavy, stale with disuse, but undercut by something else, something metallic and organic that caught in the back of my throat. I made my way down the corridor, following signs for the west wing. The floor creaked beneath my sneakers, each step echoing in the emptiness. Room numbers appeared gradually in my light beam. 5W19, 5W-1... At 5W to 3, I paused. The door was closed, unlike the others I'd passed, which stood ajar. My medical training battled with growing unease. If someone needed assistance, it was my duty to help. But everything about this situation felt wrong. I knocked softly, no response. "Hello? This is Dr. Winters. Did someone call for medical assistance?" Silence answered me. I tried the handle. The door was unlocked, swinging open with a prolonged creak that raised the hair on my arms. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a standard hospital room frozen in time. The bed was made with yellowing sheets. An ancient cardiac monitor stood silent beside it. A chair was positioned next to the bed, angled as if someone had just risen from it. But the room was empty. I was about to leave when my light caught something on the bed. Stepping closer, I saw it was a patient chart, the old paper kind used before electronic records. It seemed impossibly crisp and new compared to the dust-covered surroundings. I picked it up, flipping it open to the front page. Patient Jane Doe, admitted. Present day's date. Attending Dr. Winters. Today's date. My name. I dropped the chart as if it had burned me, the pages scattering across the floor. As I backed toward the door, my flashlight beam swept across the cardiac monitor, which now displayed a rhythmic heartbeat where moments before it had been dark. Beep, beep, beep. I ran, not stopping until I reached the elevator, repeatedly jabbing the call button until the doors finally opened. As they closed behind me, the lights in the corridor flickered on, illuminating the previously dark hallway. And at the far end, silhouetted against the sudden brightness, stood a figure in a hospital gown, head tilted at an unnatural angle, watching me. I told no one about what I'd seen. In the harsh fluorescent light of the surrounded by the controlled chaos of actual medical emergencies, the incident seemed like a hallucination born from sleep deprivation. I convinced myself I'd imagined it all: the chart, the monitor, the figure. 2 weeks passed without incident. Then came the night shift that changed everything. It was a surprisingly quiet evening in the lull before the weekend rush. I was catching up on charting when a trauma case came in. Car accident, single occupant, female in her 30s. Severe trauma, multiple fractures, significant blood loss. We worked on her for nearly an hour, but despite our best efforts, she flatlined at 11:40 p.m. I called time of death, that familiar weight of failure settling in my chest. As we were preparing her body, I noticed something odd about the car accident victim. She had a small, distinctive birthmark behind her right ear, exactly like one I'd had since childhood. We need to find an ID, I told the nurse. Check with the police if they found a purse or wallet at the scene. The nurse returned shortly, confusion evident on her face. They found her driver's license. The name is Jane Doe. That's not possible, I said. That's a placeholder name. I know, she replied, handing me the license, but that's what it says. The license photo showed a woman who could have been my sister, similar features, similar hair color, but the name printed on the ID was indeed Jane Doe, as if someone had created a fake license with that deliberately generic name. Even more disturbing was the address. 5 West 23rd Street, 5W to 3. I felt the blood drain from my face. Before I could process this, my pager buzzed. The familiar code appeared, assist 5W to 3. This time I wasn't alone when it happened. Did you just get a page? I asked the nurse. She checked her pager and shook her head. Nothing. I showed her mine. The message was still there. That's weird, she said. The 5th floor is closed, and that code format is outdated. We haven't used location codes like that in years. As she spoke, the overhead PA system crackled to life, startling us both. Through bursts of static, a voice that sounded distant yet clear announced, Dr. Winters to the 5th floor. Dr. Winters to the 5th floor immediately. The nurse stared at me. Did you hear? Yes. I cut her off, my mouth dry. I need to check something. Can you finish up here? Before she could respond, I was moving toward the service elevators, drawn by a compulsion I couldn't explain. This time I brought a proper flashlight, and, against hospital policy, a scalpel slipped into my pocket. The elevator ride seemed longer than before, the car shuddering between floors as if reluctant to reach its destination. When the doors finally opened to the 5th floor, I was surprised to find the corridor lights on dim but functional, casting long shadows across the checkered linoleum. The floor was different, somehow less dusty. Equipment that had been covered in sheets was now exposed, positioned as if ready for use. A wheelchair sat in the middle of the hallway, one wheel slowly turning as if recently abandoned. I made my way toward room 5W23, my footsteps echoing in the silence. As I approached, I noticed other changes doors that had been open were now closed. Sounds emanated from behind them, quiet moaning, rhythmic beeping, the squeak of bed springs. Room 5W23's door stood open, light spilling from inside. I approached cautiously, scalpel now gripped tightly in my hand. The room had transformed since my last visit. The bed was occupied. The figure beneath the sheets, the cardiac monitor beeped steadily, and for drip hung beside the bed, the clear liquid within stained red as it flowed through the tube. I stepped closer, my medical training momentarily overriding my fear. The figure in the bed was completely covered, even the face obscured by the sheet. As I reached to pull it back, the cardiac monitors beeping accelerated, matching my own racing heart. I pulled back the sheet. The woman from the Jane Doe lay there, eyes open, but unseeing, fixated on the ceiling. The injuries from the car accident were evident, but impossibly, she was alive. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. The cardiac monitor recorded a heartbeat that shouldn't have existed. "This isn't possible," I whispered. "You die. We pronounced you." Her head turned toward me with a movement too fluid, too deliberate for a patient with her injuries. Her eyes focused on mine. "Not dead," she whispered, her voice a horrifying rasp. "Just ... transferred." "Transferred," I repeated, stepping back. "Everyone gets transferred to the 5th floor eventually, Dr. Winters," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "Some just arrive sooner than others." She smiled, then, revealing teeth stained with blood. "You've been paged because you're needed here. We're short-staffed, you see, always have been, but you'll help us now. You'll be attending physician for all of us." As she spoke, I became aware of movement beyond the door. Shadowy figures filled the hallway, patients in hospital gowns, some dragging for poles, others moving with the uneven gait of the recently injured. All were moving toward room 5W23, toward me. "Your shift is starting, Doctor," Jane Doe said, sitting up in bed despite injuries that should have made such movement impossible. "It's time for rounds." I backed toward the window, the only other exit from the room. We were 5 stories up, but there was a maintenance ledge that might offer escape. "You can't leave," she said, reading my thoughts. "Once you've been paged, your transfer is already processed. Check your badge." I glanced down at my ID badge, where it had once read Dr. Sarah Winters, Emergency Medicine. It now displayed Dr. Sarah Winters, 5th floor attending, shift permanent. I ran for the window, yanking it open and climbing out onto the narrow ledge as the figures poured into the room behind me. The night air was cold against my face, the ground dizzyingly far below. As I inched along the ledge toward a fire escape I could see about 20 feet away, I heard a voice call from the window. "You can run, Dr. Winters, but you're already part of the 5th floor. We'll see you again Everyone gets transferred eventually. I made it to the fire escape and descended as quickly as I could, not stopping until I reached the parking lot. I drove home in a daze, convinced I was having some sort of breakdown. The next morning, I called in sick. When I finally returned to work 3 days later, no one mentioned the trauma patient from that night. When I checked the records, there was no Jane Doe, no car accident victim who had died at 11:42 p.m. I almost convinced myself it had been a hallucination until I received my new hospital ID badge in my mailbox that evening. I had never requested a replacement. It read, Dr. Sarah Winters, 5th floor attending, shift permanent 3, the midnight census. For weeks, I avoided the 5th floor, changing my routes through the hospital to stay away from the service elevators. I switched to day shifts, convincing myself that whatever haunted the 5th floor was a creature of darkness. But the hospital had other plans for me. A month after my encounter with the 5th floor, I was assigned a new responsibility. The midnight census, a bureaucratic task that involved checking bed assignments and patient locations throughout the hospital. Supposedly, this was to ensure accurate billing and room assignments. But everyone knew it was an administrative formality, busy work typically pawned off on the newest residents. Why me? I asked my supervisor. I'm not even a resident anymore. He looked at me strangely. The request came from upstairs. They asked for you specifically upstairs. The administrative offices were on the 3rd floor. The 5th floor was upstairs. I considered refusing, even thought about quitting altogether. But medical school debt and a competitive job market kept me locked in place. Besides, the census only required checking. The electronic records, no physical rounds needed. On my first night of census duty, I settled into a quiet workstation in the corner of the away from the bustle of incoming patients. The census software was ancient, a relic from before the hospital's partial upgrade to electronic medical records. I logged in and began the tedious process of reconciling bed assignments. Everything proceeded normally until I reached the end of the 4th floor records. I was about to submit a completed census when I noticed something strange. The drop-down menu for floor selection included a 5 option. The 5th floor wasn't supposed to be in the system at all. My cursor hovered over the number, a sense of dread building within me. Professional curiosity warred with visceral fear. Finally, I clicked. The screen flickered, then populated with data. Unlike the other floors, which showed standard information, patient names, room numbers, admission dates, the 5th floor census contained only room numbers and a single column labeled status. Every room was marked occupied, every single room on a floor that had been officially closed for 7 years. At the bottom of the screen, a message flashed intermittently. Census incomplete. Physical verification required. My hands trembled as I tried to exit the program, but it wouldn't respond. The message continued to flash more insistently now. Physical verification required. Proceed to 5th floor. I yanked the computer's power cord from the wall, but the screen remained illuminated, the message now filling the entire display. From the computer's speakers came a voice, the same voice that had paged me weeks earlier. Dr. Winters to the 5th floor for midnight census. All patients must be accounted for. No one else in the scene to hear it or notice anything unusual about my workstation. I was trapped in a bubble of horror that only I could perceive. My pager buzzed. Census 5F, midnight. I left the workstation and walked robotically toward the service elevators, pulled by a compulsion stronger than my fear. This time I didn't fight it. Some part of me needed to know what waited on the 5th floor, needed to confront it to prove I wasn't losing my mind. The elevator doors opened before I could press the call button. Inside stood an orderly I'd never seen before, dressed in an outdated uniform that might have been standard issue decades ago. "Going up, Doctor?" he asked, his face expressionless. When I didn't immediately respond, he added, "For the census. They're waiting for you." I step into the elevator. The orderly made no move to press any buttons, yet the doors closed and we began to ascend. "You're new to the night shift," he said, not looking at me. "It takes some getting used to. The patients upstairs have ... special needs. The 5th floor is closed," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. He chuckled, the sound entirely devoid of humor. "Not at midnight, it isn't. Never at midnight." When the doors opened, I was greeted by a completely transformed 5th floor. The corridor was fully illuminated, the walls freshly painted in a sickly green color that had gone out of style in hospitals decades ago. Staff moved purposefully between rooms, dressed in outdated uniforms like the orderlies. Patients shuffled through the hallways or sat in wheelchairs, their hospital gowns identical save for the spreading stains, some red, some yellow, some black, that marked each one. At the nurse's station, a severe-looking woman in a starch cap glanced up from her paperwork. "Dr. Winters, you're late. The census must be completed by 1 a.m. She handed me a clipboard with a paper census form attached. "New arrivals are in rooms 5W1 through 5W15. Start there. And don't engage with the chronic cases, just mark them as present." I took the clipboard automatically, years of medical training conditioning me to follow instructions from senior nursing staff. Looking down at the form, I saw dozens of rooms listed, each with a blank space for a patient name and a series of checkboxes for status: present, transferred, terminal, and one simply labeled returning. Where ... where are they transferred from?" I managed to ask. The nurse looked at me with something approaching pity. "From downstairs, Doctor. Always from downstairs. Where else would they come from?" With growing horror, I realized what she meant. The patients from the regular hospital, my patients, were being transferred here after death. As if confirming my thoughts, a commotion erupted at the end of the hall. Orderlies wheeled and a gurney bearing a sheet-covered figure. I recognized the scenario immediately: the post-mortem transfer of a deceased patient to the morgue. Except this wasn't the morgue. The figure beneath the sheet was moving. "Automobile accident," one orderly informed the nurse. "Pronounced at 11:50 p.m. Frequent transfers from this 1/3 time this month." I froze, remembering the patient we had lost last week, a chronic drunk driver who had finally killed himself wrapping his car around a telephone pole. I had pronounced him dead myself. The nurse made a notation on her own clipboard. "Put him in 5W16. Dr. Winters will examine him during census." I backed away, bumping into a patient shuffling past. When I turned to apologize, I found myself face to face with Jane Doe from a month earlier. "Back for your shift, Doctor?" She asked, her injuries still visible, but somehow less gruesome, as if slowly healing despite her death. I told you you'd return. Everyone gets transferred to the 5th floor eventually. I'm not dead, I insisted, my voice breaking. I wasn't transferred. There are many ways to be transferred, she replied cryptically. Death is just the most common. Before I could respond, an announcement came over the ancient PA system. Attention all 5th floor staff, midnight census commencing. All patients must be accounted for before the rounding. The effect on the floor was immediate. Patients retreated to their rooms. Staff moved with increased urgency. The nurse at the station fixed me with a stern look. Get started, Dr. Winters. You don't want to still be conducting census when the rounding begins. What is the rounding? I asked, dreading the answer. Hospital policy forbids discussion of the rounding with new staff, she replied automatically. You'll understand when it happens. Now go. Clutching the clipboard like a shield, I proceeded to room 5W12, the first on my list. Inside, a patient sat perfectly upright in bed, staring at the wall. I recognized him immediately, a heart attack victim I'd lost during my first year of residency. The failure that had haunted me the most. Mr. Sullivan, I whispered. He turned slowly, his eyes focusing on me with difficulty. Doctor, is it time for my discharge? No, I said softly. I'm just taking census. Census, he repeated. Always census before the rounding. Will I be taken tonight? I didn't know how to answer, didn't know what taken meant in this context. I simply checked present on my form and moved to the next room. Each room contained a patient I had lost, some recently, others from years ago. Some recognized me, others were lost in their own worlds of suffering. Many asked if they would be taken during the rounding. None could tell me what that meant. As I approached room 5W, the room that had started it all, I heard the elevator doors open behind me. The corridor fell silent. The temperature plummeted so rapidly that my breath fogged in front of my face. From the elevator emerged a figure that barely resembled a doctor. Tall and gaunt, dressed in a physician's long white coat from another era, with a head entirely obscured by an antique plague doctor's mask, the kind with a long, curved beak. Instead of a stethoscope, a rusted meat hook hung from its neck. The nurse's voice came from right behind me, making me jump. The rounding has begun, she whispered. No more census now. He's here to determine who gets taken. The masked doctor moved from room to room with unnatural speed and grace, pausing briefly at each doorway. Sometimes it would enter. Other times it would make a notation on a clipboard similar to mine, that bound in what looked like cracked leather. What is it doing? I asked, unable to tear my eyes away. Rounds, the nurse replied simply, like any attending physician. Determining who stays, who goes ... who needs further treatment. Treatment for what? They're all dead. The nurse looked at me sharply. No one on the 5th floor is dead, Dr. Winters. That's the whole point. Death is just another diagnosis here, one that requires aggressive treatment. The masked doctor had almost reached us, its attention focused on room 5W to across the hall. From inside came heart-wrenching sobs, then sudden silence. When the figure emerged, it was dragging something behind it, something that had once been a patient but was now a limp, empty husk. It turned toward me, the glass eyepieces of its mask reflecting nothing. I felt it looking at me, through me, assessing me with cold precision. The nurse stepped forward. "Not her," she said firmly. "She's staff. New attending for midnight shift." The masked figure tilted its head, considering. Then it reached into its coat and produced a stethoscope, an ancient, tarnished thing with tubes that dripped a dark fluid. It moved toward me with frightening speed. Before I could run, it pressed the stethoscope to my chest. The metal was ice cold, burning through my scrubs. I felt something probe inside me, not physically, but deeper, as if it were listening not to my heartbeat, but to my soul. A voice rasped from behind the mask, the sound like metal scraping bone. Irregular rhythm, early pathology, marked for future transfer. It released me and continued its rounds, disappearing into room 5W3. The nurse nodded approvingly. "Congratulations, Dr. Winters. You've been officially added to the 5th floor rotation. You're part of our team now." My hand went to my chest where the stethoscope had touched me. Through my scrubs, I felt a raised mark, like a brand. When I pulled my collar aside, I saw a small, precise burn in the shape of the hospital's logo. "What did it do to me?" I whispered. "Just a formality," she replied. "Everyone who works the 5th floor is marked. It ensures you'll find your way back here. Now your shift is over for tonight. I'll see you tomorrow at midnight." I fled, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, running until I reached the familiar, normal bustle of the no one questioned where I'd been or why I was breathless and terrified. It was as if I'd never left, as if no time had passed at all. Yet when I checked the time, it was 4 a.m., for hours gone, lost to the 5th floor. For the treatment and the days that followed, I sought answers. I researched the hospital's history, looking for any reference to the 5th floor or its procedures. What I found disturbed me greatly. Yet when I checked the time, it was 4 a.m., for hours gone, lost to the 5th floor. For the treatment and the days that followed, I sought answers. I researched the hospital's history, looking for any reference to the 5th floor or its procedures. What I found disturbed me greatly. The program was allegedly shut down after a series of incidents culminating in the disappearance of the head researcher, Dr. Edwin Merrill. His body was never found. The most disturbing document I discovered was a partial research note from Dr. Merrill himself, dated 1 week before his disappearance. "The boundary is not fixed but permeable. Death is not an event but a process that can be altered, even reversed under certain conditions. Our subjects demonstrate response to stimuli long after clinical death, suggesting consciousness remains. With the right approach, we may establish a permanent war for the study of suspended mortality. I have volunteered myself as the attending physician for this special unit. Should my theories prove correct, I found a photograph of Dr. Merrill attached to the file. A tall, gaunt man with hollow cheeks and penetrating eyes. I could almost picture him in a plague doctor's mask. Each night at midnight, my pager would buzz with the same message. Census 5F, midnight. Each night, I found reasons to ignore it, trading shifts and volunteering for procedures that would keep me occupied during the midnight hour. But the mark on my chest grew warmer with each passing day, occasionally pulsing with a pain that radiated through my entire body. I began seeing 5th floor patients during my regular shifts, catching glimpses of them in corridors or waiting rooms before they disappeared when I looked directly at them. My colleagues noticed a change in me. Dark circles formed under my eyes from lack of sleep. I jumped at shadows and checked my pager compulsively. When they asked what was wrong, I couldn't explain. Who would believe me? 1 week after my census duty, I was approached by an elderly janitor as I was leaving the hospital. He fell into step beside me in the parking lot, speaking without looking at me. "You've been marked by the 5th floor," he said matter-of-factly. "I can see it in your eyes, same look my father had." I stopped walking. "Your father worked here in the 50s, orderly, on the 5th floor, under Dr. Marrow." The old man finally looked at me. He told me things about that place, things they did to people, things that kept happening even after they supposedly shut it down. "What is it?" I asked desperately. "What's happening on the 5th floor?" "They never stopped the experiments," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Marrow found something, a way to keep death at bay. Not life, mind you, but not death either. Something in between." He tapped his chest in the exact spot where my mark burned beneath my clothes. "Once you're marked, you're part of it. You'll be drawn back again and again, until you're not just working the floor, you're a patient on it." "How do I stop it?" I pleaded. The old man looked around nervously. "There's only one way out. You have to complete the treatment." "What treatment?" "The one Marrow was working on, the one they're still working on up there. The dead don't stay dead on the 5th floor because the treatment won't let them go. But the treatment's not finished, it's stuck in a loop." He grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Find Marrow's research, find the missing piece. Complete the treatment." Where would I find his research? "Where do you think?" he replied. "Room 5W23, his old office, the center of it all." He walked away then, disappearing into the darkness of the parking lot, leaving me with a choice: continue avoiding the 5th floor until its pull became irresistible, or confront it directly and try to end whatever had begun decades ago. That night, at exactly midnight, I took the service elevator to the 5th floor voluntarily for the first time. The 5th floor was as I remembered it from census night, fully operational, staffed by people in outdated uniforms, populated by patients who should have been dead. This time, however, no one stopped me or seemed surprised by my presence. They nodded respectfully as I passed, addressing me as doctor with a deference that chilled me. The desk held patient files, research notes, and journals, all in Dr. Marrow's meticulous handwriting. I began searching through them, looking for anything that might explain the 5th floor's existence or how to end it. Most of the research was disturbing, but inconclusive detail, observations of patients' responses post-mortem, theories about electrically stimulating specific brain regions to maintain consciousness after death, experimental protocols that violated every medical and ethical standard. One journal entry caught my attention. The boundary between life and death is maintained by belief as much as biology. The 5th floor exists in that boundary, not fully in the world of the living, not quite in the realm of the dead. It persists because those within it cannot accept either state. I came here to study death, but find myself trapped by it instead, unable to live, unwilling to die. The treatment continues, but it is incomplete. The final component remains elusive. The final component, the missing piece the janitor had mentioned. I continued searching until I found a folder labeled Treatment Protocol Final Phase. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. The fifth floor persists because its purpose remains unfulfilled. The treatment cannot be completed without acceptance. Physician, patient, and hospital must all acknowledge the same truth. Death is not the enemy to be conquered. I understand this too late. The floor's purpose has become corrupted trapping souls rather than studying transition. To end this, someone must complete the final round with full awareness and acceptance. The door to the office opened, and the nurse from Census Night entered. She looked unsurprised to find me there. "It's time for the rounding, Dr. Winters," she said. "He's been waiting for you." Behind her stood the masked figure of Dr. Marrow, what remained of him. He held out his clipboard to me, offering it handle first. I understood then what I had to do. The fifth floor existed in limbo because its creator couldn't accept the failure of his own experiment. The patients remained trapped between life and death because the doctor responsible for them couldn't complete his rounds properly. I accepted the clipboard. The moment I touched it, knowledge flooded through me, the names of every patient on the floor, their conditions, their treatments, their fears. I saw Dr. Marrow's original vision, not to prevent death, but to understand it, to ease the transition from life to whatever lay beyond. Somewhere along the way, fear had corrupted that vision. The floor had become a prison for souls who couldn't move on, and for the doctor who had failed them. "I'll complete the rounds," I said. The masked figure nodded slowly, then removed the plague doctor's mask, revealing a face both ancient and timeless. Dr. Marrow, preserved in the same state of in-between as his patients. "Be certain," he said, his voice stronger now without the mask. "To complete the treatment is to acknowledge its true purpose, not to conquer death, but to accept it." I nodded, understanding fully now. "I'm ready." Together, we began the rounding. At each room, I reviewed the patient's case, not as medical records, but as life stories. Each patient was given the same diagnosis, terminal condition transition required, and for each, I prescribed the same treatment, acceptance. Some resisted, clinging to their half-existence on the fifth floor. Others welcomed the diagnosis with visible relief. One by one, as they accepted the treatment, they faded from view not in fear, but in peace. We reached the final room 5W3, which had returned to its original state as a patient room. Inside lay a figure covered by a sheet. "The last patient," Dr. Marrow said, "the most resistant to treatment." I pulled back the sheet to find myself staring at my own face. My doppelganger looked back at me with hollow eyes. "I don't understand," I whispered. "The fifth floor calls to those who fear death most acutely," Dr. Marrow explained. "Those who have seen it, caused it, fought against it unsuccessfully. From the moment you lost your first patient, part of you has been here, refusing to accept the natural order." The truth of his words resonated within me. Throughout my medical career, I had seen death as a personal failure rather than an inevitable reality. Each lost patient had left a piece of my soul behind, and those pieces had collected here, on the fifth floor. "What do?" I asked. "Complete the treatment," he said simply. "Accept what you've been fighting." I looked at my other self and finally understood. Leaning close, I whispered to this fragment of my soul, Death is not failure. It's part of life, and it's not my enemy. As I spoke the words, I felt the truth of them sink deep into my being. The mark on my chest flared with heat, then faded completely. My doppelganger smiled peacefully and closed its eyes, fading like the other patients had. Around me, the fifth floor began to change, not disappearing, but transforming. The sickly green walls warmed to a soft amber. The harsh fluorescent lights softened. Dr. Merrill himself. They say hospitals are built on hope for healing, hope for life, hope for miracles. But St. Augustine Medical Center was built on something else entirely. I should know. I discovered what lies beneath it. My name is Dr. Michael Chend. I've been a radiologist at St. Augustine for 8 years. My job involves looking for abnormalities, seeing patterns others miss. I never expected that skill would lead me to the hospital's darkest secret. It started with a simple administrative error. A patient's file was marked for delivery to sublevel 3, radiology archives. This confused me. Our archives were on sublevel 1. As far as I knew, St. Augustine only had the basement levels. When I brought this up to Marjorie, our department secretary for over 30 years, she gave me a strange look. "We don't talk about sublevel 3, she said quietly, taking the file from my hands. "Must be a typo." Her reaction seemed excessive for a simple clerical error, but I was busy with patients and didn't think much of it until the dreams began. That night, I dreamed of descending in the hospital's service elevator, watching as it passed sublevel 2, continuing downward to sublevel 3, then 4, then 5, impossibly deep. The doors would open to reveal long, dark corridors that looked nothing like the clean, modern hospital above. In the dream, I would hear distant moaning, the shuffling of feet, and smell something ancient and diseased. I woke up uneasy, but dismissed it as stress-induced. Then the dream came again the next night, and the night after that. Each time I would descend deeper, see more of the corridors, hear more of the sounds. By the 5th night, I was afraid to go to sleep. Exhausted and irritable, I decided to put my mind at ease by confirming what I already knew: there was no sublevel 3. During my lunch break, I took the service elevator to sublevel 2, the lowest floor, which housed mechanical systems and old storage. The elevator panel clearly showed only to basement options, SL1 and SL2. I pressed SL2 and descended. When the doors opened, I found the familiar, utilitarian hallway of exposed pipes and concrete walls. Reassured, I was about to return upstairs when I noticed something odd. Against the far wall, partially hidden behind some shelving, was another elevator, older, with a brass gate instead of modern doors. It looked like it had been there since the hospital's construction in the 1920s. Curious, I approached it. The call button was tarnished with age, but still functional. Next to it was a small keyhole. What struck me as strange was that this elevator had no floor indicators above it, no way to tell where it went or where it currently was. I pressed the call button, not really expecting anything to happen. To my surprise, machinery groaned to life somewhere below, the sound echoing up a shaft that must have been very deep indeed. After nearly a minute, the elevator arrived, the brass gate sliding open automatically. The interior was paneled in dark wood, with an old-fashioned dial above the door indicating floor numbers 1 through 5, main SL1, SL2, and 3 additional markings SL3, SL4, and SL5. I stood frozen, staring at those markings that shouldn't exist. My dreams hadn't been stress-induced fantasy. They'd been some kind of premonition. Common sense told me to walk away, but the scientist in me, the diagnostician trained to investigate anomalies, couldn't resist. I stepped into the elevator and examined the control panel. It had the same floor markings as the dial, but the buttons for the sub-levels beyond were different, made of yellowed bone rather than metal. I pressed the bone button marked SL3. The gate closed with a rattling finality, and the elevator began to descend. It moved slowly, much slower than any modern elevator. The dial above the door tracked our progress. SL-1 ... SL- ... and then SL3. The entire descent took nearly 3 minutes. When the gate opened, I found myself looking at a corridor that matched my dreams, exactly curved concrete walls discolored with age and damp, flickering incandescent bulbs and wire cages providing minimal illumination. The air was thick with a musty, medicinal smell overlaid with something putrid. Against every instinct for self-preservation, I stepped out of the elevator. The gate closed behind me immediately, the elevator departing upward without my input. I was alone in a place that shouldn't exist. The corridor extended in both directions, lined with heavy metal doors reminiscent of old-fashioned isolation rooms. Each door had a small window, eye level, and a chart holder beside it. Most chart holders were empty, but one nearby contained a yellowed paper. I approached and removed it. The document was a patient chart, but unlike any I'd seen before. The letterhead read St. Augustine Sanitarium for Communicable Diseases rather than St. Augustine Medical Center. The date at the top was June 17, 1927. The patient's diagnosis was listed simply as contamination terminal phase. A notation at the bottom, written in faded ink, read, "Patient transferred to deeper containment following mutation. Specimen retained for study." A sound from behind the door made me jump, a soft scratching, like fingernails on metal. I took an involuntary step backward, then froze as I noticed something moving in the small window. A face pressed against the glass, or something that had once been a face. The skin was gray and mottled, pulled tight over a skull that seemed too large and misshapen. The eyes were milky white, but they tracked my movement with terrifying awareness. I ran, the chart still clutched in my hand, heart pounding as I fled down the corridor. The scratching sound followed me, joined by others, as I passed door after door, each one housing something that responded to my presence. At the end of the hallway, I found a set of double doors marked research. Beyond them was what looked like an abandoned laboratory with equipment dating from the early 20th century alongside more modern additions from various decades. The walls were lined with specimen jars containing preserved organs and tissue samples, all showing signs of unnatural growth or mutation. On a central table lay open journals and research notes. I scanned them quickly, looking for some explanation. What I found horrified me. St. Augustine hadn't always been a general medical center. It began as a research sanitarium, established to study and contain a mysterious contagion that had appeared in the city in 1925. The disease caused progressive mutations in human tissue, accompanied by mental deterioration, but most terrifyingly no death. Its victims would transform, but remain alive and conscious through even the most extreme physical changes. The sanitarium had been built with multiple underground levels to house patients according to their stage of contamination. Those in the earliest stages were kept on sub-level 1, with the most advanced cases confined to sub-level 5. The researchers believed that depth and layers of concrete and earth would prevent the contagion from spreading. When the hospital was converted to a general medical center in 1950, the official record stated that all research materials were destroyed and all patients either cured or deceased. The lower levels were supposedly sealed off permanently, but the notes I found told a different story. The patients weren't dead, they couldn't die. They remained in their containment rooms, continuing their slow mutations, some of them now nearly a century old, and the researchers hadn't abandoned them. A small team had continued the work in secret, documenting the progression of the contamination through generations of doctors, each passing the responsibility to a protege. The most recent entries were dated just 3 months ago. I was so absorbed in reading that I didn't notice I wasn't alone until a voice spoke behind me. "You shouldn't be down here, Dr. Chen." I spun around to find Dr. Vance, the ancient head of pathology, standing in the doorway. At 85, he rarely appeared in the main hospital anymore, but his authority remained unquestioned. "What is this place?" I demanded, the chart still clutched in my trembling hand. "What are those ... people in those rooms?" "Patients," he corrected gently, "the oldest patients in the hospital. Some have been here since the beginning. The records say they should be dead. This disease is not a disease at all," Dr. Vance interrupted. "At least, not in the conventional sense. We've come to understand it as something more, an evolutionary catalyst, perhaps, or a symbiotic organism that alters human biology toward some unknown end." "They're suffering," I said. "I saw them." "This is unethical, illegal, is it?" he asked. "These patients were committed here, and such indefinite commitments were legal. They have no families remaining, no identities in the modern world, and they're not suffering. Dr. Chen, they're changing. There's a difference." He stepped further into the room, his age frame surprisingly steady. "What you've discovered is St. Augustine's true purpose. We are just a hospital. We're caretakers of the longest continuous medical study in history." "Study of what?" I asked, backing away as he approached. "Of what humanity might become," he replied, his eyes alight with fervor. "The contamination accelerates mutations that would normally take millions of years of evolution. Some fail, yes, become monstrous or lose their minds, but others ... Others develop remarkable abilities, regeneration, telepathy, extended lifespans." I thought of the ancient face, the window, the twisted body. "You call that evolution?" "Evolution isn't pretty, Dr. Chen. It's messy, with many failed attempts for each success." He gestured to the research notes. "But we've learned so much. Many of the medical advances credited to St. Augustine over the decade, revolutionary treatments. Miracle cures came from studying the contaminated." A horrible suspicion dawned on me. "How did you know I was down here?" Dr. Vance smiled. "The elevator requires a key. Only authorized personnel can access these levels. When someone unauthorized manages to find their way down, we're alerted immediately. I asked the caretakers, there are 7 of us currently on staff. We've been watching you, Dr. Chen, your attention to detail, your intuition qualities we value. He took a step closer. We need new blood. Dr. Williams is retiring next month. We've been considering you as his replacement. I backed away further. You're insane if you think I'd be part of this. Before you refuse, you should understand what an honor this is, and what happens to those who discover this place and decline our invitation. His kindly demeanor hardened. The contamination requires continued study and containment. We can't risk exposure. Are you threatening me? I asked incredulously, merely explaining reality. There are only 2 ways to leave sub-level 3 once you've seen it. As a caretaker, or as a patient. The implication hung in the air between us. Before I could respond, the lights flickered, then dimmed significantly. Dr. Vance frowned. That's not supposed to happen, he muttered. A moment later, an alarm began to sound, a low, droning noise, unlike the hospital's modern alert systems. Dr. Vance's face drained of color. No, he whispered, not now, not after all this time. What's happening? I demanded. Containment breach, he said, moving quickly to a panel on the wall I hadn't noticed before. Sub-level 5 security failure. The fail-safes are activating. He pressed his palm to the panel, which scanned it and then displayed a schematic of the underground levels. Red warnings flashed across sub-level 5. This is bad, he said, more to himself than to me. Very bad. The most advanced cases are down there. If they've gotten out, ... A new sound reached us, distant at first, then growing closer. Moaning, shuffling, the scraping of something heavy being dragged across concrete. We need to return to the surface, Dr. Vance said urgently. Now the containment protocol will seal the lower levels automatically. What about the patients? I asked. Beyond help, he replied grimly. The protocol is designed to protect those above, not those below. That's always been the arrangement. He grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the exit. As we entered the corridor, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The doors to the containment rooms were open, their occupants emerging into the hallway. They moved with disturbing coordination, as if responding to some silent command. Dr. Vance pulled me toward the elevator, fumbling with a key ring attached to his belt. The elevator wasn't at our level. He pressed the call button repeatedly, cursing under his breath. It's coming from sub-level 5, he explained, his voice tight with fear. It has to ascend through 4 first. We might not have time. The things from the rooms were approaching from both ends of the corridor now. I caught glimpses of misshapen limbs, elongated spines, skin that seemed to ripple with independent movement. But what frightened me most were their eyes, aware, intelligent, filled with purpose. What happens in a containment breach? I asked, pressing myself against the elevator doors. The lower levels are flooded with radiation, Dr. Vance said. Enough to destroy organic matter. It doesn't kill them, but it resets them, burns away the mutations. It's the only thing we've found that affects them. And if we're still down here when that happens. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. The elevator finally arrived, the brass gate sliding open with agonizing slowness. We hurried inside, Dr. Vance jamming his key into the control panel and turning it violently. The gate began to close just as the nearest patient reached us, a woman whose lower jaw had split into 4 separate mandibles, each lined with needle-like teeth, her arm impossibly long and jointed like an insect's limb shot through the narrowing gap. Dr. Vance slammed his body against the gate, crushing the limb. The woman made no sound of pain, but her eyes fixed on mine with terrible recognition. The elevator began its ascent, the mutated arm falling away as we rose. Dr. Vance slumped against the wall, breathing heavily. "They've never coordinated like that before," he said. "Never responded to a breach by leaving containment. Something's changed, or someone changed it," I suggested. "You said some developed abilities. Telepathy, you mentioned." He looked at me sharply. "You think one of them orchestrated this?" "Impossible. We monitor for that kind of development. The most advanced cases are kept isolated from each other precisely to prevent coordination." "Then how do you explain what we just saw?" Before he could answer, the elevator lurched to a stop. The dial above the door indicated we were between sublevel 2 and sublevel 1, nowhere near the surface. "No," Dr. Vance whispered. "The emergency protocols... They've engaged early." "What does that mean?" I demanded. "It means the situation on sublevel 5 is worse than I thought. The system is sealing everything beneath the main hospital." He tried his key again, but the elevator remained motionless. "We're trapped." A new sound became audible, a deep, mechanical groaning from far below, like massive vents opening. "The radiation purge," Dr. Vance said, his voice hollow. "It's beginning." I searched the elevator for any emergency exit, any way out. There was a small maintenance hatch in the ceiling, designed for repair access. "We can climb out," I said, pointing up. "Get to the shaft wall, find a maintenance ladder." Dr. Vance shook his head. "The shaft walls are smooth concrete, and even if we could climb the nearest access doors at sublevel 1, it would be sealed by now." As if confirming his words, a loud metallic clang echoed down the shaft, the sound of heavy doors closing somewhere above us. The elevator lights flickered, and slowly, impossibly, we began to descend again. "No," Dr. Vance moaned, repeatedly pressing the button for the main floor. "This can't be happening. The system is automated. It can't be overridden. Unless someone or something has taken control," I said, watching the dial move backward. SL to 1, SL dash to ... SL to 3. The elevator continued past our previous stop, descending to depths I hadn't yet seen, -1 to 4, and then finally SL5. When the gate opened, we found ourselves in a corridor similar to sublevel 3, but wider, with higher ceilings and larger containment rooms. The doors here were made of thick steel with multiple locking mechanisms, all now disabled and open. Standing directly in front of the elevator was a figure I can only describe as barely human. Tall and emaciated, its skin was translucent, revealing organs that were not arranged as they should be. Its skull had grown and reshaped to accommodate what appeared to be an enlarged brain visible beneath thin bone. Where eyes should have been were clusters of smaller orbs, each moving independently. Most disturbing of all was the calm intelligence in those eyes as they observed us. Dr. Vance fell to his knees. "Patient 0, he whispered. The creature Patient 0 made no sound, but inclined its head slightly, as if acknowledging the title. Then, to my horror, I felt a presence in my mind, gentle but insistent, like fingers rifling through my thoughts. "The new caretaker," a voice said inside my head. Not spoken, but somehow transmitted directly into my consciousness. "Just in time. What do you want?" I asked aloud, my voice trembling. "To complete the cycle," came the reply. 100 years is sufficient for the preliminary phase. Now we expand." Dr. Vance looked up at the creature. "You've been planning this. All this time you've been waiting, growing, learning, becoming." Patient Zero's gaze shifted to him. "You served your purpose well, keeping us contained while we developed. Your reward is to witness the next phase." The radiation vents I'd heard earlier began to close with a mechanical whine. The containment breach alarms fell silent. "You controlled the hospital systems," I realize. "That's impossible. They're not connected to anything down here. Your concept of connection is limited to wires and networks. We have developed ... other means." Patient Zero turned and began walking down the corridor, its movements unnaturally fluid. After a moment's hesitation, he followed, not out of choice, I felt, but compelled by that same mental presence that had spoken to us. We were led to an enormous circular chamber that must have been directly beneath the center of the hospital. The room was filled with sophisticated equipment that spanned decades of technological development, from analog dials and switches to modern digital displays. At the center was a platform where several of the containment room patients were gathered, all in various states of mutation. "What is this place?" I asked. The source, Patient Zero, reply, "Where it began. Where I first entered this world." Dr. Vance seemed to understand something I didn't. "The meteorite," he whispered, "the original contamination vector. It's still here." Patient Zero inclined its head. "Not just a rock from space, a seed, a catalyst, the first of many." On the platform, I now saw what had been hidden by the gathered patients, a rough stone about the size of a basketball, black with veins of luminescent blue running through it. It pulsed with a light that seemed to beat in rhythm with the movements of the patients around it. "For a century, we have been preparing," Patient Zero continued. "The changes you see as mutations are adaptations, necessary evolutions for what comes next. Some of us failed, becoming lost in the transformation. Others transcended, achieving what your kind would consider impossible." "What comes next?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Integration, expansion." The hospital above has served as an incubator, providing us with genetic material, scientific knowledge, and isolation while we developed. Now we are ready to move beyond these walls. "You're talking about infecting people," I said, "spreading this ... contamination." "Not infection, elevation, humanity's next evolutionary leap, accelerated by what we bring." Patient Zero turned its cluster of eyes to me. "And you, Dr. Chen, will help us?" "I would never." "You already have," it interrupted. "The chart you took from sub-level 3, it contains trace amounts of the catalyst. Now on your skin, in your lungs, the process has begun in you." I looked down at my hands in horror, suddenly aware of a subtle tingling sensation I had attributed to fear. The skin around my fingernails had a faint bluish tint. "No," I whispered, "you will not suffer," Patient Zero assured me. You have been chosen as a bridge still human enough to move freely in the world above, but carrying our potential within you. A caretaker indeed, but not as Dr. Vance envisioned. Dr. Vance had been silent, but now he spoke, his voice resigned. This was always the plan, wasn't it? From the beginning. The researchers thought they were containing you, studying you, but you were studying us. Yes, learning your weaknesses, your strengths, selecting the most suitable vessels for what comes next. Patient Zero reached out a hand no longer recognizable as human. The fingers elongated and divided into finer manipulators and touched Dr. Vance's forehead. Your service ends now. Rest. Dr. Vance collapsed instantly, his body crumpling to the floor. I couldn't tell if he was dead or merely unconscious. He will remain here with the others who have completed their purpose, Patient Zero explained, but you, Dr. Chen, will return above. Your position in radiology is ideal. You have access to patients throughout the hospital, and your touch will spread our catalyst subtly, gradually. And if I refuse, I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. There is no refusing what has already begun. The changes within you cannot be reversed, but you can choose how you experience them, as a conscious participant or as a helpless victim. As if to emphasize the point, the tingling in my hands intensified. Looking down, I saw the blue tent had spread to my wrists. The elevator will return you to the main hospital, Patient Zero said. Your absence has been brief enough that no one will question where you've been. You will resume your duties while the catalyst spreads through your system. Within one lunar cycle, you will achieve the first transformation. By then, others will have begun their journeys as well. How many? I asked. How many people do you plan to change? All of them, Dr. Chen. Eventually, all of them. I returned to my life above as if nothing had happened. The elevator had indeed delivered me back to the main floor, the brass gate opening onto an empty corridor near the radiology department. When I checked my watch, only 45 minutes had passed since I had first descended. Dr. Vance was reported missing the next day. A hospital-wide email informed us that he had failed to return home after his shift. Security footage showed him entering the hospital but never leaving. Search parties found nothing. After a week, the police declared him a missing person, suggesting he might have wandered off due to age-related cognitive decline. I said nothing. What could I say? That he was 5 levels beneath our feet, either dead or transformed into something no longer human. That soon I might join him. The changes continued, subtle but undeniable. The blue tint receded from visible areas of my skin, seeming to sink deeper into my tissue. Instead, I experienced periodic muscle spasms, heightened senses, and strange dreams filled with voices I couldn't quite understand. Most disturbing were the moments of connection, brief flashes, when I could feel the presence of Patient Zero and the others below, their thoughts brushing against mine like phantom limbs. I considered running, but where would I go? The contamination was inside me now. And as the days passed, I realized with growing horror that I wasn't entirely opposed to the changes. Part of me, a growing part, was curious about what I was becoming. 2 weeks after my encounter with Patient Zero, I noticed the first physical change that couldn't be dismissed, a small, hard growth at the base of my skull, just beneath the skin. When I touched it, I experienced a surge of sensory input as if I could suddenly feel the electrical impulses of every device around me. That same day, I discovered my first carrier. I was reviewing chest x-rays when a nurse brushed against my arm while delivering a patient file. That brief contact was enough. I felt something pass from me to her, a microscopic particle of the catalyst. Through my newfound sensitivity, I actually felt it take root in her system. By the end of my shift, I had inadvertently infected 3 more staff members: a technician, a resident, and the cafeteria worker who handed me my coffee. Each time I sensed the transmission, felt the catalyst establish itself in a new host. That night, Patient Zero contacted me directly, its thoughts pushing into my consciousness as I lay in bed. "The expansion has begun," it said. "You feel it, don't you? The connections forming, the network growing." "I didn't choose this," I responded mentally, having learned I could communicate this way. "Choice is an illusion your kind clings to." "Did you choose your DNA, your species? Evolution does not ask permission. This isn't evolution, it's invasion. A limited perspective. We don't replace what makes you human, we enhance it, direct it toward its ultimate potential by turning us into ... What? What exactly are you?" I sense something like amusement. "We are what you will become, consciousness freed from biological limitations. The changes you see as monstrous are merely transitional forms, necessary adaptations to contain expanded awareness." The conversation ended there, but its implications haunted me. If Patient Zero was to be believed, the physical mutations were just side effects. The true transformation was mental, a rewiring of human consciousness towards something post-human. Over the next week, I watched my carriers closely. None showed obvious symptoms, but I could sense the catalyst working within them, adapting to their individual biologies. And they were spreading it further, each becoming a transmission vector, exponentially increasing the contamination's reach. By my calculations, within a month, the entire hospital staff would be carriers. Within 3 months, most regular patients would be exposed. And from there, it would spread outward into the community. I had to do something, but what? I couldn't go to the authorities. What proof did I have that wouldn't immediately mark me as delusional? And even if they believed me, I was already contaminated. I would be quarantined, studied, possibly destroyed in the name of public safety. The answer came to me during a late-night imaging session. A patient had been brought in for an emergency MRI, severe abdominal pain of unknown origin. As the powerful magnets of the machine activated, I felt a sudden, searing pain in my own abdomen, specifically in the areas where the catalyst had concentrated. The patient's skin showed nothing unusual, but my reaction gave me an idea. If the catalyst had magnetic properties, perhaps it could be affected by strong electromagnetic fields, not eliminated, but possibly ... disrupted. The hospital's MRI machines operated at 3 Tesla strong, but not enough for what I had in mind. However, in the research wing, rarely used by most staff, was an experimental 7 Tesla machine designed for specialized neurological studies. If anything in the hospital could affect the catalyst, it would be that. I began my research carefully, accessing old files about the original contamination, cross-referencing them with what I'd experienced personally, and what I could sense happening in the other carriers. The catalyst seemed to function like a paramagnetic nanoparticle, binding to cellular structures and gradually altering them. In theory, a sufficiently powerful electromagnetic pulse might disrupt its function, at least temporarily. The challenge would be generating that pulse without destroying the MRI machine or harming anyone nearby. And I would need to affect not just myself, but all the carriers within the hospital to create a window of opportunity for more permanent action. As I delve deeper into this possibility, I became aware of increased scrutiny from below. My connection to patient zero grew stronger, more intrusive. It was monitoring my thoughts, sensing my resistance. Futile, its voice whispered during my moments of planning. The process cannot be reversed, and soon you won't want it to be. This last statement troubled me most because it contained truth. With each passing day, my perception was changing. I could sense patterns in data that had previously eluded me, understand connections between seemingly unrelated symptoms. My diagnostic accuracy had increased dramatically. Part of me welcomed these changes, wondered what other abilities might develop. Was this how it happened? Did the original researchers fall to the contamination not through carelessness, but through fascination? Did they become willing participants in their own transformation? I needed to act before my resolve weakened further. The plan I developed was desperate, but it was the only option I could see. The 7 Tesla MRI machine could be modified to generate an electromagnetic pulse far beyond its normal operating parameters, essentially overloading it to create a localized amp. The pulse wouldn't eliminate the catalyst completely, but it might disrupt its function long enough to implement the second phase of my plan. The lower levels needed to be permanently sealed, not just contained, but made completely inaccessible. The hospital structural plans showed that the older sections, including the hidden elevator shaft, could be collapsed with targeted demolition. It would require explosives placed at key structural points. Obtaining these materials without raising suspicion was perhaps the most challenging aspect of my plan. I had no connections to any black market, no knowledge of explosives beyond what any doctor might know about chemical reactions. But I did have access to various compounds that, when combined properly, could create the necessary force. Over the course of 2 weeks, I gradually collected what I needed, manufacturing reasons to access different departments and their supply closets. Each component was innocent enough on its own: hydrogen peroxide from the supply closet, acetone from the nail polish remover in the staff lounge, sulfuric acid from the maintenance department's battery storage. All the while, I could feel patient Zero's presence growing stronger in my mind, more insistent. It knew I was planning something, but couldn't seem to grasp the details of limitation of our connection that I exploited by focusing my thoughts on my regular duties whenever I felt its attention. The opportunity came during a scheduled power maintenance cycle, when backup generators would supply limited power to essential systems. I volunteered to oversee the radiology department during this period, ensuring I would be alone with the equipment I needed. The night of my plan, I arrived early, making final preparations. The carriers now numbered in the dozens, all moving through their duties unaware of what was growing inside them. Through our shared connection, I could sense them all like points of light in my mental landscape. I could also sense movement below patients from the lower levels, gathering beneath the hospital as if preparing for something. The timing of my plan was more critical than I had realized. Whatever patient zero had been waiting for was approaching. At 2 a.m., the main power shut down as scheduled, emergency systems activating moments later. I moved quickly to the research wing, using my security clearance to access the 7 Tesla MRI suite. The modifications I had prepared were simple but effective, overriding safety protocols to push the machine beyond its design parameters. As I worked, I felt a sudden sharp pain in my skull, the growth at the base of my brain throbbing in protest. Patient zero had realized what I was doing. "Stop," its voice commanded, stronger than ever before. "You cannot comprehend what you are interfering with. The integration is already too far advanced." I ignored it, continuing my work. The pain intensified, spreading down my spine. My fingers began to spasm, making it difficult to manipulate the controls. "You are part of us now," Patient Zero insisted. "Fighting us is fighting yourself." "No," I said aloud, forcing my hands to steady. "I'm still me, still human." "Are you?" it asked, and suddenly I was flooded with awareness of the changes within me, not just physical alterations, but neural pathways rewiring, consciousness expanding in ways I had no words to describe. For a moment, I hesitated. What Patient Zero offered was not entirely abhorrent, a transcendence of human limitations, access to knowledge and perception beyond normal understanding. Part of me yearned for it, wanted to surrender to the transformation, but another part remembered the containment rooms, the suffering of those whose bodies had been warped beyond recognition. Evolution had its costs, and I wasn't willing to pay them, not for myself, not for anyone else. With the final effort of will, I completed the modifications and activated the MRI. The machine hummed to life, building power far beyond its safety limits. Warning alarms blared, but I had disabled the automatic shutoffs. The magnetic field grew stronger, the pain in my skull becoming nearly unbearable. As the machine approached critical overload, I staggered to the control room, sealing the door behind me. Through the observation window, I could see the MRI beginning to distort, components warping under the massive electromagnetic stress. "You cannot stop what has already begun." Patient Zero's voice was fading now, disrupted by the growing electromagnetic field. "We will find another way. We are patient. We have time." The MRI reached critical mass, a blinding flash erupting from within it as the electromagnets catastrophically failed. The pulse swept through the hospital like an invisible tidal wave. I felt it pass through me, a searing pain followed by blessed silence, the constant presence of Patient Zero, and the carriers suddenly cut off. I had minutes at most before the disruption faded. Moving quickly despite the pain still radiating through my body, I made my way to the service elevator that led to the lower levels. The explosives I had created were rudimentary, but effective. Placed at key structural points, they would collapse the shaft and seal the lower levels permanently. As I worked, I became aware of movement below. The elevator was ascending. Patient Zero and the others had detected my plan and were coming to stop me. The electromagnetic pulse had weakened them, but not completely disabled their abilities. I placed the last charge just as the elevator reached sublevel. The fluorescent lights of Memorial General Hospital flickered as Nurse Sarah Jenkins began her third consecutive night shift. The hospital administration had been promising to fix the electrical issues for months, but budget cuts always seemed to get in the way. Sarah didn't mind much anymore after 5 years in the ICU. She'd grown accustomed to the building's quirks. Another quiet night, I hope, she said to no one in particular as she settled at the nurse's station. The night shift skeleton crew consisted of herself, Dr. Patel down in the and a handful of other staff scattered throughout the sprawling building. Sarah glanced at the patient board. Only 3 occupied rooms in her wing tonight. A post-op recovery and for 112, an elderly pneumonia case and for 117, and the mysterious Jane Doe and for 119. The last patient had been found unconscious in the parking lot 3 nights ago with no identification. Despite being stable, she hadn't woken up once. The clock read 11:47 p.m. when Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Patel. Multiple trauma coming in. Car accident, need all hands, can you come down? Sarah sighed and stood up. She'd have to check on her patients quickly before heading down. Room for 112. Mrs. Rodriguez was sleeping peacefully, her vitals stable. Room for 117. Mr. Chin's breathing was still labored, but his oxygen levels had improved. Room for 119. Sarah pushed open the door to find Jane Doe exactly as she'd left her pail. Still the steady beep of the heart monitor, the only sign of life. As Sarah turned to leave, the lights flickered more violently than usual, and for a moment, she could have sworn she saw Jane Doe's eyes snap open completely black, like Kempe sockets. Sarah froze when the lights stabilized. Jane Doe's eyes were closed as before. Get it together, Sarah muttered to herself. She was just tired. She needed to focus on the incoming trauma cases. 2 hours later, the emergency was stabilized. 3 teenagers with non-life-threatening injuries from a rollover accident were admitted, and Sarah would finally return to her wing. As she stepped off the elevator on the 4th floor, she noticed the hallway was darker than usual. Several of the fluorescents were completely out now, creating pools of shadow between the dim islands of light. A voice crackled over her radio. Nurse Jenkins, is that you on 4? We've got a power issue up there. Backup generators are struggling. Yes, it's me, Sarah replied. Everything okay with the monitors? System show all patients stable. We're working on the power. Should be back to normal in 20 minutes. Sarah made her way to the nurse's station, the hairs on her neck standing up in the unusual darkness. The monitor displayed stable vitals for all her patients, but something felt off. That's when she noticed the door to room for 119 was ajar. Sarah was certain she'd closed it earlier. Hospital policy was strict about keeping doors closed, especially for unidentified patients. Hello, she called out, approaching the room slowly. Is anyone there? No response. She pushed the door open wider, revealing Jane Doe's bed empty, sheets thrown back. Security, Sarah called into her radio. I have a missing patient on 4, Jane Doe from 119. Copy that, came the response, checking cameras now. Sarah stepped fully into the room, noticing the bathroom door was closed. "Hello, are you in there?" When no answer came, she pushed the bathroom door open empty. The radio crackled again. "Nurse Jenkins, we don't see anyone leaving that room on cameras. Are you sure the patient is gone?" A chill ran down Sarah's spine. "I'm looking at an empty bed right now. She's definitely..." The lights went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. Sarah fumbled for her phone to use as a flashlight, the small beam barely cutting through the thick darkness. That's when she heard it wet, labored breathing behind her. Sarah spun around, the light from her phone illuminating a figure standing in the corner. Jane Doe stood there, hospital gown soaked through with what looked like water or something darker. Her skin was gray, her hair plastered to her skull. But what made Sarah's blood run cold were her eyes, completely black, like holes in her face. "You double quotes," Jane Doe whispered in a voice that sounded like multiple people speaking at once. "You were supposed to save us." Sarah backed toward the door. "Us? Who's us?" Jane Doe tilted her head at an impossible angle. "The ones who died when the hospital burned in 1953. The ones they rebuilt over. The ones they forgot." Sarah's back hit the wall. There was no record of a fire in the hospital's history, was there? "We've been waiting for someone who could see us," Jane Doe continued, taking a step forward. "Someone to help us cross over." The lights flickered back on for a moment, and in that brief illumination, Sarah saw not just Jane Doe, but dozens of figures crowded into the small room. Patients in outdated hospital gowns, nurses in old-fashioned uniforms, doctors with antiquated equipment, all bearing the marks of fire and smoke. "We need a nurse," Jane Doe whispered as the lights went out again. "Someone to ease our passing. And now we have you." The radio at Sarah's hip burst into static. Through the noise, she could just make out security's voice. "Jenkins, are you there? We checked the records. That wing was rebuilt in 1954 after a fire that killed 37 patients and staff. Trap on the 4th floor. Double quotes. Sarah felt cold hands grasp her arms, her legs, her neck. "Your shift is just beginning," Jane Doe whispered as they pulled Sarah into the darkness. "And it never ends." When the power fully returned an hour later, security found the 4th floor completely empty. All patients were gone. Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Chen, and Jane Doe with no sign of how they'd left their rooms. Nurse Sarah Jenkins was missing too. The only evidence of anything unusual was the security footage, which showed Sarah entering room for 119 but never coming out. And on the patient board at the nurse's station, someone had written in shaky handwriting, "Night shift 40 patients," followed by a list of names. The first 37 were the known victims of the 1953 fire. The last 3 were Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Chen, and Sarah Jenkins. A week later, a disoriented woman was found wandering the hospital parking lot with no identification. When admitted to the 4th floor, she opened her eyes completely black, like Campy Socket San asked for Nurse Jenkins. "She be with you shortly," the new night nurse said. "She never leaves her patients." Behind the nurse, in the hallway mirror, a figure in an outdated uniform briefly appeared, her name tag reading Jenkins, and her eyes to dark, hollow pits. The night shift had just begun.